I've spoken with a lot of people about AI and ChatGPT, and the same concerns keep coming up. Is the AI stealing my data to train itself? Am I going to find out that my accounting data or my trade secrets are being consumed by the AI to make itself smarter? These questions generally come from a misunderstanding of how GPT and large language models work with your data. And once you understand the basics of how it all really works, you'll feel a lot more at ease with AI in general and be able to ask the right questions about how to keep your data safe. Now, there are a lot of different AI models out there. What I'm going to focus on are LLMs, and in particular, on OpenAI's GPT. Everything we're going to talk about will apply to all of the LLMs out there. It's a really fast-moving technology area, so who knows what this might look like down the road. Let's talk about it. So what is GPT anyway? Well, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, and the word we want to focus on is pre-trained. What that means is that all of that training data, that vast amount of curated internet content and other sources have all been baked in to the GPT model as part of its initial training process. It doesn't continue to learn, it's pre-trained, and that's really the end of it. But I hear you say, how can it answer questions about my data? That wasn't part of its training. I know for a fact that GPT can answer questions about my email and my accounting data, current events, all kinds of stuff. I've seen the demos. So how can it only know what it was pre-trained with and still answer questions about my data? To answer that, we need to put everything in context and really dig into what goes on when you ask GPT the question. So let's start with a basic conversation between a user and the AI. Maybe the user writes a simple prompt like, "What's the largest breed of domestic cat?" This prompt text is then added to a data structure called the context as a user message, and then the context is sent to the AI for processing. Everything the AI knows is now the sum total of all that pre-trained data plus whatever's in the context. Once the AI comes up with a response, it returns that information and immediately forgets that it has ever had that conversation. Yeah, that's right. The AI doesn't remember a thing after responding to a request. Now, I know what you're thinking. I've chatted with GPT, with Copilot, and many times had long conversations. It's obvious that they do remember as I'm asking them questions and follow-up questions. Let me explain. Remember that everything that the AI knows is either part of its pre-trained data or it's in the context that you've provided. It's important to understand that point, and it'll make everything else super clear. You see, in order to make it seem like the AI is remembering the conversation, we have to keep supplying that back to the AI. It just knows its own training data and our context, and it doesn't retain anything after returning the response. It's really that simple. You create the impression of a conversation by maintaining your own history of each prompt and response, and just adding that back to the context each time so that the AI can draw on that history when answering the next prompt. When you're using a chat interface and it remembers the conversation, it's really the chat program itself, not the AI. The chat program is maintaining that history and sending it along in the context each time you enter a new prompt. So now that you know how this works behind the scenes, let's talk about how we can get AI to answer questions about your data. If you thought I was going to tell you to put it in the context, well, you'd be absolutely right. You see, on one hand, it's really pretty simple. Any information that you want the AI to be able to reason over has to be put in the context. But simple is kind of simple in the way that chess is simple. The rules are pretty easy, and it's the strategy that'll win or lose the game. Here, the strategy comes down to deciding how best to select the data that's meaningful to the questions that you're going to ask, and then send that in the context. You really can't just take all of your corporate data and send all of that along. There simply isn't room. Because of that, you've got to have strategies in place to choose what's most important, most contextual to the questions that you're about to ask. That context bucket we've been talking about has a limit on how much it can hold. Exactly how much will depend on which AI model you're talking to. Also, when we talk about how much, that size is measured in something called tokens. Tokens is roughly equivalent to a word of average length, but to keep it simple, assume 100 words will be about 130 tokens. This is where we get into the topic of Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG. RAG is simply the process of retrieving information from your corporate data and augmenting your AI's knowledge base so that it can answer questions about your data. Data that you've retrieved through RAG is still going to have to be sent to the AI in the context. How you retrieve that data, the specific technique that you use, is going to depend on where the data is currently stored and what format that it's in. Going through all the details on RAG, all the different techniques involved, different libraries involved, would fill in a video on its own. So if you'd like to talk about that in some more detail, let me know in the comments below. For now, just know that it's a well-documented, well-understood set of techniques. There's lots of information on it, lots of libraries available, so you don't have to start from scratch. Just remember that whichever RAG technique you end up with, no matter how complicated it might end up looking like, you're still interacting with the AI in exactly the same way we've been talking about. The information you retrieve through RAG is going to get shared into the context, along with any history that you're maintaining, and the new prompts for the questions that you're about to ask. All that gets sent to the AI, where it gets grounded with that information, and reasons over it, and replies back with a response. So is the GPT AI stealing your data, using it to train itself and get smarter, possibly exposing your data to other users? No. As we've talked about, it's a pre-trained model. Nothing that you're sending in the context, none of your prompts, none of your data is being used to retrain that system. Anything you send it is immediately being forgotten by the AI. Anything resembling memory, like the ongoing conversations, is an artifact of the chat program itself. Whichever application is between you and the AI is providing those features, not the AI itself. So does that mean that there's no risk to your data when talking to the AI? Well, no, there's always potential for risk. But now you know that it's not likely to be the AI itself. It's more likely to be the stuff between you and the AI. The libraries involved, other programs involved, the networks, back-end servers, and so on. Look at the encryption policies, look at your network policies, look at data retention policies, data sovereignty, all of the things that you would normally look at when trying to assess the risks to data that's traversing the internet to a back-end server system in the cloud or anywhere else. The AI is part of that equation, but it's really the least likely location for having a data breach. It's going to be something in between. So focus there. Dig into the data privacy, data retention, encryption, etc. of those intermediate services and ensure they're supporting your data security requirements, and have some kind of published policy for responsible AI usage that you feel you can trust. And lastly, keep in mind that this is a rapidly evolving landscape. There are new models coming out almost daily, it seems. And there's nothing to say that sometime in the near future that there couldn't be a large language model that is able to retain data or is able to dynamically train or fine-tune itself based off of the data that you're communicating with it. Anytime there's a new technology out that you're going to interact with, check about their data retention policies, check on their security, and see if they meet your needs and meet your own data privacy and protection policies.